$1 million Bitcoin. Is this fact or fiction? A lot of big whales putting big money on the line. This is Around the Blockchain. Thank you for joining Around the Blockchain. Please go ahead, hit that like button. We got some great guests, and let's get right into it, including a first-timer. On the top left, we have Mine Your Biz. Mine Your Biz, how are you doing today? How was your weekend?
My weekend was phenomenal. You know what? I'm feeling a lot better coming to the week, knowing that I'm here with such excellent, lovely, and intelligent people. Thanks for having me.
All right, and that leads us to our next guest. Of course, we're talking about Scott Melker. Scott, how are you doing today? Are you feeling bullish this week?
I am feeling pretty bullish this week, although I guess it depends on what asset class you're talking about.
Hey, now, that's an asterisk on that one. And then we have Matty B still in the insane asylum that you have yet to escape.
Right.
Can we expect anything in the background today?
Well, it's empty here, right? So I got it very cheap. It's desolate, no one in here, so I wouldn't expect anyone to go walk.
All right, let us know if you see Jack Nicholson. And then first time on today, we have Karlton Dennis. Karlton, can you say maybe a little background? Where do you come from?
Yes, guys, listen, excited to be on here with everyone. I'm a licensed enrolled agent and tax strategist. Excited to talk all things finance and money.
All right, and we're going to lead with you with what is up with the U.S. tax code? What gives? No, all right. No, let's talk about Forbes and their recent admission that maybe it isn't crypto's fault after all. You know what? Maybe it was the big bank's fault. They've been tightening their grip. They're calling it Operation Choke Point 2.0. And the narrative now is the thin ice that the banking financial institutions are on. And is it crypto's fault? Is it that big, nasty demon called Bitcoin? And it appears that overregulation may be the root cause here, stemming at least from the SVB crisis. Dodd-Frank forcing these banks to hold these bonds just to obtain this mythical AAA rating. They say, hey, we have this asset. It's worth a whole lot of money. You must invest or you're going to lose your ratings and you're going to lose money. So here, invest. And then you can see a nice little breakdown of these huge bank failures. There's Washington Mutual Bank on the left. It was the largest bank collapse of all time. So WAMU, if you see it. And here are some of the more recent bank failures. And we have yet to see the little mini bubbles. You can see all that contagion that it spread. Well, right now, we don't have Credit Suisse on there. The bubbles are growing. Now, Scott, are the bubbles going to keep growing? Are they going to lead to pop bubbles? Or can we expect the recent bank collapses to look similar to Washington Mutual, in your opinion? Are we going to see tons and tons of mini bubbles around some of the recent failures?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll see tons and tons of little bubbles. This contagion doesn't just stop at one. And in the era of, fast information, the internet, social media, you can see that the velocity of these failures happens so much faster than it ever could have in the past. I mean, Washington Mutual, that was weeks and weeks and weeks for people to try to withdraw billions of dollars. We saw over 40 billion of withdrawals in less than 24 hours in Silicon Valley Bank. We saw, I believe, 40 billion or 70 billion being withdrawn from First Republic, which is 40% of what they hold. There's no question that this keeps going. The real question is, how big is the Fed's bazooka and how much are they willing to backstop all of this? It seems that their plan was to pray, hope that this stops at 3, 4, 5 banks. But if we're at 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 banks, there's no way that they have the money to do this without QE infinity, which I think is inevitably what's now coming. And it becomes a choice between fighting inflation or saving the banking system.
All right, QE infinity. I like that one. And infinity seems like what some of these rates are going to be going to if they don't turn these things around. Now, Karlton, the banks push these bonds and these treasuries on these institutions, said, hey, AAA rating. These are good as gold, baby. It's good as gold. Don't you worry. Just hold it for 10 years. Everything is going to be fine. Well, they keep buying these things. And then interest rates skyrocket. The value of these assets are going down. But if they hold to maturity, they get their full value. I keep seeing these nerds say something about time value of money or hold to. Explain like I'm 5. If I hold it until the end, it's going to be worth a lot of money. So why are they selling at a loss today?
Yeah, because the banks are currently right now over leveraged. The banks practice a system of fractional reserve banking where when we deposit money inside of the bank accounts, they will turn around and reinvest that money into things that will probably get them a better return than what they're giving us, right? The 0.001 that we earn from putting our monies in the bank. But what happened was every single person, well, not every single person, the majority of taxpayers around the nation started hearing about what was happening with the banks. And so they started to rush in to recuperate some of their money. Unfortunately, when you have so many taxpayers going in at the same time to get their money, and there's not enough money because you've been doing fractional reserve banking, they have to sell some of their assets at a loss to be able to cover the money that needs to be paid back out to the depositors. And so what we're seeing right now is the fact that the FDIC is only insuring less than 2% of all deposits. And so you're seeing that, a lot of people have access to this information. So there's fear going on. So they're going to run to the bank, they'll get their money back out. And unfortunately, the banks don't have that money because they're being held inside of bonds.
All right. Some say it's fictional reserve banking. Now, Karlton, you're sure it's not the only thing, hiding some giant traps. Looks like these banks have some giant traps as well. Now, Mine Your Biz, he brought up an interesting point where I'm depositing money and I earn money back. This is reminding me of a simpler time. I call it 2022, where I give you crypto and you give me 10%, 20% risk-free. Do you think that we're going to see a similar collapsing of bank after bank after bank? Because in 2022, crypto protocol after exchange just fell one right after another. It was a snowball effect. And it seemed like, hey, they're all borrowing from each other so they can promise me that rate of return. Are the banking collapses of 23 going to be similar to the crypto collapses of 22?
No, DZ, they're going to be far worse.
do
And here's
agree.
why. So as far as it being far worse, here's an issue. And I totally appreciate what was mentioned before, but I have to correct the record. I think that Kenton, I apologize. I've forgotten my panelist's name. I'm terrible. I should probably actually Karlton. Good grief. Yeah, I promise I can read when I'm actually looking at the screen. But Karlton had mentioned that we work with a system of fractional reserve banking, and that would have been true up until 2020 when that was suspended. The reserve rates have been effectively reduced to zero. These are facts. The reserve rate is effectively zero. Our banks are not required to reserve a specific fractional amount of what they claim to have on our behalf. So when you ask, what is the comparison between the crypto custodial systems that we've become accustomed to and banks, it was already laughably different, right? It was already such a stark contrast between the amount of reserves that crypto custodians needed to keep versus what banks needed to keep. And now it's effectively nothing. They don't have to do anything in order to maintain their good standing with FDIC. So I'm genuinely concerned. Now, do I think that necessarily means that we're going to have some runaway? I mean, like Scott is saying, QE infinity. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily what it means. Maybe there are other measures that can be gone into, but I'm not an expert in that arena. All I know is that I've read the public record of the effective reserve rate being reduced to zero, and we've been living in those conditions for the last 2 years. And anybody who hasn't paid attention to that, like, I'm sorry. They basically sold your kids. They sold our future. They sold the future of the dollar and its dominance. And I guess for short-term gains, for the short-term ability to maintain control over the status quo here in the United States, to maintain that sort of de facto world leadership position. But for how long? I mean, clearly it's a house of cards. So DZ, I'm actually worried. I wasn't worried before. I'm worried now.
All right. You said hide the kids, hide the wife. That guy's advice back in the day, I guess, was correct. Now, Karlton, I'll get to you in 1 second, Matty. Karlton, any response? Is this true? I didn't think zero was a real number. Is it actually 0% of my assets?
I mean, you probably have a little bit more research than I do. Was it Matty or Scott that had said that?
Seth,
Mind Your Biz. Yeah, I might have a little bit more research than I do into that regard, but I'm just as fearful as you are. I think that what we have seen is just what we have seen. There are already banks that are falling and tumbling. It's just the banks that we have heard about. And so I do think that this is going to be an incredible snowball.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, Matty B, speaking of snowballs, I'm pretty sure you're stuck in an Arctic tundra right now. That's the only explanation I can think of why you were trapped here. Is this all right? So I think of this thing where it's called mental shelf space. There's a finite amount of mental shelf space you can devote to something. You only give, so many fires oxygen when you're these regulators. Is the banking crisis giving crypto a reprieve currently as all the eyeballs are on Credit Suisse and SVB and other banks that start with the letters S and I? is crypto and Bitcoin and Ethereum, are we kind of sliding under the radar right now, or are they too busy looking at the banks?
Well, I don't think it's a reprieve in that they're actually trying to give crypto a break. I think they just have bigger fish to fry, and one of the fish is their own bum in the frying pan right now. So, like, it's basically economic calamity of the likes we've never seen. I don't think our parents have seen it. Like, it's gonna get crazier and crazier as the days go by, and I am fearful, but only for people that have no clue that this tsunami is coming, right? So I've always been fascinated with tsunamis for some reason. I'll go into wormholes and I'll watch tsunamis for a couple hours. But we have a financial tsunami coming at us, and you got to get the higher ground right now. And if you don't have any Bitcoin, well, that tsunami is going to take you out, and you're never going to be seen again. So
Is
yeah,
it the
now,
tsunami?
now's the time.
Is it the tsunami is going to take me out, or the gimp suit fellow in the background?
What gimp suit, fella?
Oh yeah, I clearly imagine things. I got so much Bitcoin on the mine. It fixed up
That's
all
right.
my finite shelf space is just focused on that. I'm hallucinating,
That's
clearly.
right.
All right. Well, speaking of hallucinating, I'm talking about Credit Suisse's balance sheet. I must have hallucinated that this was a valuable company. So at one point, I think it was worth 40 billion, then 20 billion, then 10 billion. Now bought pennies on the dollar around $2-3 billion. So quite the fall from grace over just say past 10, 15 years for Credit Suisse. They are acquired by a European super bank, UBS, over the weekend. Like I said, they paid pennies on the dollar. Steal of the century. Some are saying literally a steal, because there's some bondholders who got their positions liquidated. There's a asset class where the shareholders are protected, but the bondholders are going to be left holding an empty bag of air. It's got a lot of people upset. And EU regulators are actually stepping away from the heavy-handed approach that the Swiss regulators are taking. Those who don't know, Swiss regulators is not part of the European banking cartel, some would say. Now, Scott, you'd brought up the amount of time these takeovers take and the amount of time it took for the banking collapse to take. Well, this Swiss takeover here took 48 hours, a huge, huge takeover, 2 days over the weekend. People don't even like to work on the weekend. Are we going to see second and third order effects from this because it was maybe too hastily done? Or, is this maybe the best scenario and the worst is behind us?
The worst is not behind us. We'll 100% see effects. There's a lot of people who think that Deutsche Bank could be next because all of these banks are inextricably tied. I mean, you point to the fact that they wiped out bondholders but kept shareholders intact. Now, usually you would see the shareholders also losing their money. That is not really standard practice to see it this way. But what interestingly, also, those bonds were created, that structure, after the global financial crisis of 2008. And their purpose was to take on more risk in certain scenarios like this. So it's not a huge surprise that those are getting wiped out. But Credit Suisse is absolutely a monster. This is a much bigger story even than Silvergate or Silicon Valley or First Republic or whatever banks inevitably will be those small bubbles that we discussed before. And it's a UBS buyout, but fully backed and guaranteed by the Swiss Central Bank. I mean, this is Swiss banking we're talking about. The Swiss banks, right? They're not a part of the European Union, right? They don't use the euro, but these are supposed to be the most secure, safest banks in the world where billionaires keep their funds secured. And we're talking about a massive bailout, as you said, that took only a matter of days. There is no way that this is the end of it. Run and hide your kids, like you said. They're raping everybody out here.
Scott, real quickly, do you think that the fact that the big billionaires have their money in there, is that part of the reason the shareholders were able to claw back something?
Of course. I mean, there's no question that if you're a billionaire and your money is there, that you're going to get preferential treatment. I mean, did everybody see that Warren Buffett had about 20 private jets landing in Omaha this weekend to meet with the leaders of every regional bank in the country, because he's the king of the bailout, and I think about 30 or 40% of Berkshire Hathaway's stock is invested. Fund is invested in banks. Come on, man. Come on. We know what's going on here.
Two things there. One, billionaires have different rules. Never would imagine that. And some of my best stock trading has been copying Berkshire Hathaway in 08, 09. I think Bank of America, one of my better plays ever. I think I got it in under $5. Long time ago, back when BZ had hair, everybody. He had hair back then. All right. Well, let's talk about these big banks. There's also globally protected banks. They're called GSIB. Now, Karlton, we have more and more debts just piling up on these big globally protected banks. They're protected by the IMF. Scott mentioned Deutsche Bank as another possible, another shoe yet to drop here. Do you think that we're going to see more pain in some of these? And what region do you see getting the most pain? Is this going to be the US, Europe, or Asia?
I mean, personally, I think it's going to be us. Nixon kind of, screwed us over years ago. So I think when we took the dollar off the gold standard and just started printing money, we showed everybody our hands, the cards that we were willing to play. So I think personally, we're going to see the biggest pain in the United States. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on that. And I think some of it will bleed over to Europe.
All right. And Karlton, quick follow-up. He's, I think, the highest popularity rating upon his election. Was Nixon a crook?
That's a tough one. I mean, I don't have an opinion on somebody when I couldn't live in that era, so I couldn't tell you if he was a crook or not. But I will say the decisions that were made has been absolutely detrimental to our nation, and I know that a majority of presidential officials, if they could go back, would undo everything that Nixon did. So,
all right.
For better or worse.
All right, yeah, check it out. Yeah, he was wildly popular, when he got elected there. All right, now Mind Your Biz. I'm sure you got some hot takes on Nixon and Watergate, but we're not gonna. We could go down there. We probably shouldn't go down there. He said America is going to be the next to fail. You have I don't want to say a foolproof system, but it's a system that I often quote when it says, "Hey, if it hits the proverbial fan, there's a couple things Seth likes investing in, and it's not bonds of big banks. It's not Credit Suisse stock. Besides Bitcoin and Monero, what are some of the tangible assets that, if it were to hit the fan, and a lot of people think it is, especially if someone is arrested tomorrow, what are you investing in?
Well, DC, I think in the time that I've been coming on to around the blockchain and interacting with the Bit Squad, I think we've discovered that we're kindred spirits in that I prefer precious metals, and my two favorite precious metals are lead and brass. So yes, that's kind of my go-to in terms of tangible, collectible, preparedness-oriented investment strategy. Something that if the proverbial poop hit the what is it, the oscillating rotator, whatever, however you want to say it. Yes, that's what I would want to have in my war chest, literally and figuratively. That's what I'd want to have as dry powder, literally. I'd want to know that these things that we all talk about in very quaint ways that I'm prepared to actually use in the real world. But I'm that kind of guy. I'm a big DIYer. I'm really big on handling things on my own. I've fixed almost every car I've ever owned. I've done improvements to almost every home I've ever bought. And I really like the idea that I can be self-sufficient, including growing food at home, etc. We've talked about that, but preparation is the last line of defense against the inflation of monetary supply. And I mean, we talk about like some of the fallout effects of these banks failing. I mean, we're talking about orders. We're talking about amounts, right? Dollar amounts that most people can't comprehend. You talk about $1 trillion. That's a figure that most people can't even comprehend. You got to bring it back to the level of preparedness and the level of actionability that the individual can actually handle on their own. And one of those things you can do is just have extra food at home, have something that, that doesn't spoil overnight. And then, yes, have things that people might want to barter with you. You don't want to use them in any kind of a threatening manner, but you can be persuasive holding on to some of these preparation goods in other ways by just trading them in small amounts. Some people even believe that if you are, dollar cost averaging into lead and brass, the way I do, that you can use small units as a replacement for the dollar if there are other people who are willing to be your counterparty. So that's my preferred. Yeah.
Strategy. I was speaking on a show last week. I think it was Friday. I said, if it were to hit that future, I don't think slivers of silver or gold would be worth more than the things you were referring to. A couple things here. You said it's hard to picture $1 trillion. I agree, but I watched Mr. Beast videos, so I know what it kind of looks like, right? If I just picture a billion of those suitcases, we're going to be good. And I think the word you're looking for is oscillating gaseous molecular rotation device or something like that, right?
That's it. But I
That's
knew
what
I
it
could
was.
count on you, DZ.
Yeah. You know, just pulled that one out of the ether there. All right. Well, Matty B, I mean, that's one way of preparing. There's going to be other people who say, look, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to invest in that. I'm not going to start learning how to tan leather and make my own jerky. Someone is just, they're betting on civilization. They're betting on cowboys to be walking around and to still have justice in the streets at high noon. What are some of the it doesn't hit the fan ways you can prepare? If we do just have a similar to 08, 09 crisis, I mean, are you buying precious metals like gold and silver? Are you stocking on food? Are there particular stocks or asset classes that can weather storms in times of downtrodden economic times? What's the Matty plan?
Well, it's funny because my first foray out of the banking industry was when I was trading currency. And once you go down that road and you realize how the banks work, you're like, I got to get the hell out of here, right? So the first thing I did was I dug up my backyard of all my bartending tips from a decade of slinging drinks, and I bought gold and silver. And then I realized, well, what good is gold and silver when there's no food and the stores are empty and everyone's kind of marauding through the streets looking for things to eat, but you have this little chest of gold and silver? Really is useless. And that's where the lead comes in, because basically that's what you're really going to need. And I'm not too embarrassed to say that I have about 2 stashes of that 25-year-old astronaut food in my basement, and I've got 2 different water purifiers so I can go down to our river, which is basically a toilet bowl because everything kind of comes from the Mississippi into our lake, and that's what we drink from. So I can actually put that in and drink it. So as far as that's, I'm safe that way. But when it comes to investing, I mean, it's always Bitcoin. Like, as I still have the gold, I still keep it. I haven't sold it. It's more like just a thing I look at from time to time, and because it's my evolution. If it wasn't for gold and silver, I wouldn't really be in Bitcoin. I would have kind of, probably lost all my money. But yes,
why did you get these MREs from NASA 25 years ago? Is that a blizzard coming, or was it, forest fires?
Well, probably everyone on this panel, we have our dark moments where it's like, oh man, things are worse than I thought it could ever be, right? And in those dark moments, I also have friends that I turn to. Some of them have guns. I'm always like, how many guns you got? Are they legal? No, they're not legal. Okay, well, put me down for a couple. Where's your cabin again? How many guns you got in your cabin, right? And so how about this? I'll bring all my food, my astronaut food, and my water purifier, and I'll meet you at your cabin with your guns. Those are in my dark days, Daisy.
You know what? I would trade for some MREs. Have you ever ate MREs? Hit that like button. I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina. A lot of hurricanes, a lot of Red Cross giving out MREs. I've ate many MRE in my time, but what's your favorite flavor? All right, let's move on and talk about the $1 million Bitcoin. It is all stemming from the former CTO of Coinbase, and this tweet right here. He is quoting someone as James Medlock. I'll bet anyone $1 million that the U.S. does not enter hyperinflation. I will take that bet. You buy 1 Bitcoin, I send 1 million USD. 40-1 odds as each Bitcoin's worth roughly 25K. Term, 90 days from now. Now, at first, I was saying, oh, he's just betting on hyperinflation. He's not betting on Bitcoin will hit $1 million. No, incorrect. He is saying Bitcoin will hit, here we go. It's this tweet right here. We click here. Let's see. Quick update. Moving forward with the bet, just working out escrow logistics. But the world is in 80s. Let's see. We move up. I'm sorry. It's such a long thread. Okay. Just as in 08, the bankers lied. Central bankers, banks, and regulators have lied to all dollar holders and depositors. This isn't typical fractional reserve situation. There isn't enough in the banks for an on mark-to-market basis to cover withdrawals. Literally not enough money to cover withdrawals, he is saying here. So quite a scary situation. I don't know if it'll hit that bad. I know a lot of people are saying it's maybe not quite possible. Here we go right here. I did want to just share this. Terms of the bet. Bitcoin is worth greater than $1 million in 90 days, then I win. Less than $1 million, then the counterparty gets the 1 million. We're going to go around the blockchain. I think everyone's probably going to say maybe a little unrealistic. We are definitely going to Matty's and Mine Your Business house if it does hit that level. But let's just say banks do fail. There is a collapse. Mine Your Biz. And we're going to stick away from price predictions, but is it even possible for Bitcoin to hit $1 million, whether it's 10 years from now, 50 years from now? Is that even a possibility given the market cap of the asset class?
Yeah, I think you're getting into the realm, yeah, totally, of just what's possible. We're not making predictions, any of us, by discussing it. But as a person who's not an economist, like, newsflash, I am not qualified to give you tax advice the way Karlton is. I do not have a FINRA certification, so even if you paid me, what I tell you is not considered legally, not considered advice. Just to set the record straight there before people, in before the troll comments about, like, hey, nice, not advice, but actually advice. Legally, I can't even give it to you. We could never set up a relationship in which I could give you what's legally considered advice. But as I understand it, there's a measure of the monetary supply called M2, which takes into account all kinds of ways that we measure what the value of our rotating supply of dollars is in the United States. And M2, as of 2022, hit its all-time high of just over 21 trillion all in, right, total. And if you were to take that level of Bitcoin price and you were to map that across the entire supply of Bitcoin, rather the theoretical supply of Bitcoin, so we've already lost about 4 million Bitcoin due to death, theft, and loss. But again, we'll humor the maxis, we'll humor the bulls, and pretend like you actually could map it across the entire coin supply. You can't. But if you could, you're still looking at about $20 trillion, right? The fully diluted market cap of Bitcoin would have to go to $20 trillion. Now, that's huge. That's massive. That's replacing every US dollar that's currently in circulation, whether it's on some kind of a digital ledger or it's printed as cash notes. That's a very tall order. Now, consider also the number of people who actually use Bitcoin. We would have to figure out, even in a circular Bitcoin economy, roughly how many people are actually willing to accept it as a counterparty. You've seen in El Salvador, it's been quite a difficult thing to do. Yeah, you have people who've been mandated to accept it, but not everybody really enjoys it. I had an Uber driver while I was at ETH Denver who is an immigrant from El Salvador, and he said, yeah, a lot of us don't like it because they lost a lot of their bag after receiving it. So map that onto people who are not familiar with how the asset works, not familiar with how to hold it, not familiar with key security, seed phrase security. It's a little bit of a dystopian nightmare for people that don't really understand how Bitcoin works yet, to be thrust into a position where their dollars are worthless, and the only way they can function in the world is by adopting this brand new, newfangled digital currency, magic internet money that they don't understand, and that they could be totally, like, robbed of at any moment by shadowy supercoder hacker guys that, they were worried about, like, clicking the wrong link about, like, mortgages in their email. Now with Bitcoin, they could lose their entire life saving by not holding these keys correctly. I don't see humanity being prepared to adapt as fast as Balaji is proposing here, right? The former CTO of Coinbase is proposing here. And even if it could, the fully diluted market cap of Bitcoin would not support it because of the death, theft, and loss that has taken place in the Bitcoin supply. And then beyond that, you just have enough counterparties that right now would simply say no. They simply wouldn't accept it yet. And that's me, as somebody who believes in Bitcoin, just saying, like, no, I got the reality goggles on. $20 trillion fully diluted market cap of Bitcoin sounds like Balaji is smoking everything and the kitchen sink. I don't know what's going on there, but I cannot even partly get behind this prediction of $1 million Bitcoin in under a quarter. It's crazy.
All right. Now,
Totally
Scott, he brought up a really good point, and that is the difficulty of on-ramping and the ease in which you could lose your life savings. Maybe we're used to it, seed phrase. We understand the importance of it, but not everybody, when they're first on-ramped into the space, feels the same way. Will we have to create a new system for mainstream adoption? Or just like the smartphone, can we drag grandma and grandpa kicking and screaming where they'll have to get with it or just get left behind?
I mean, there's so much nuance to this conversation and so much to unpack here. First of all, Bitcoin's not going to $1 million in 90 days. Matty was a bartender. Serve me whatever Balaji's having, bro. Get that in me deep, right? Give me an IV. But I love Balaji, honestly, and I'm actually hosting him. I'm hosting him on Spaces tomorrow to discuss this very thing. But no, I think that this is basically a massive PR move for Bitcoin. But to answer the other question, I do think it will get to $1 million eventually. And a lot of the issues that he just described will be abstracted away by that point. If that takes 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we won't be talking about seed phrases and grandma and grandpa and it will have been a long ramp up to $1 million. So all of those issues will have been long solved. We've had our 0 to 1 moment in crypto. Now everybody, all the entrepreneurs and innovators and developers are here working on that 1 to 10 moment. So if we're at $1 million, mainstream adoption will have happened long before that, and we won't be talking about that. So I just have to sort of push back on the way that would happen. I agree that if it happened in 90 days, it would be highly problematic, and it's going to be full Mad Max, and I'll be, riding with you guys to Gastown with our army of white-faced, whatever dudes those were from the movie. That's just not going to happen. But I do think that we eventually get there. But in that time, it's become the norm to utilize it. We won't be worrying about counterparties and things like that, because to get to that point, it will have to be accepted and it will have to evolve.
Scott, I'm actually getting breaking word. No, the ice caps are melting. It won't be Mad Max. It will be Waterworld. And so we're going to have a Waterworld type scenario, and it's the smokers. Gotta watch out for
That's
the smokers.
Worse. Mad Max is way more fun than Waterworld. Waterworld
shout out to everybody who has a raft. And he has gills. Shout out to anybody who has a map tattooed on their back. All right, Matty B, we're both bartenders. I would also like a shot of whatever Balaji was drinking there. What are your thoughts on $1 million Bitcoin? I know you have a different currency. They're pretty closely linked, and not exact 1-to-1, but close enough. What does $1 million Bitcoin feel to you? Is this something 50 years in the future, or is this more of a 5-10 years Mad Max future?
Well, I mean, anything's possible, but I think there is maybe a genius little marketing arbitrage going in here, because if he has $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and it just goes up as 5 or 10%, he might make a back end off that more than the million he pays out, right? So, and we also have to remember we're on his side too. Like, say what you want about him, we all want mass adoption, but I do believe 90 days. See, not to get back to what we're talking about, Prepper, but there's a month that you got to survive, right? When everything hits the fan, you basically got to go away for 2 weeks with your astronaut food and your water, and then come back in 2 weeks. So if price went to $1 million by 2 weeks, there would be nothing. Like, the ramifications of the Bitcoin price going to $1 million means everything's basically collapsed within 2 weeks. Food shortages, people going crazy. There is no money. It's not like people are going to the bank and going, you know what? I've on second thoughts put my money into Bitcoin, right? The banks are gone. The money's gone. It's somewhere, but it's definitely not going in there. So I do believe $1 million Bitcoin is going to happen. It'll take time, 90 days. Whoa, that would be a wild ride. I don't think it's going to, but hey, it'd be fun to watch. And I mean, at this point in my simulation, anything's possible.
It would kind of feel like that Plan B coming to fruition October 21, where the 60-something K October prediction worked, and then November was 100-something K, and you're like, oh my God, he just hit August, September,
Genius.
October. November must also hit. It's only math. Now, Karlton, I tend to agree. I kind of want to ask about the tax. First, what are your thoughts on $1 million Bitcoin? What does that world look like? And second, can the U.S. government survive Bitcoin being the nation's most used currency? Would we lose all tax revenue, or would we evolve the stores and the point of sales, and would we have the government clawing satoshis just like they claw back taxes?
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with every single person that it's a stretch to see $1 million showing up in Coinbase for Bitcoin. I just couldn't see that happening in 90 days. And I would agree, it's most likely a marketing play. I think it's for mass adoption and attention. 90 days is crazy. But I also wouldn't think that it's completely unrealistic to see spikes like this in the future. One of the things that we do know is that things are very uncertain right now in the marketplace. And when things are uncertain, people tend to freeze. They tend not to do anything. And so I know that a lot of people wouldn't be jumping into Bitcoin right now when there's so much uncertainty with the banks, even though the information we know about Bitcoin as experts who study the markets, and there's not enough information in the marketplace that would require people to make an action to just start jumping over to Bitcoin that aggressively. So I think it would take some time. Same thing, if we were to switch over to Bitcoin becoming the new currency, that's going to take a mass adoption. And I think the central banks would want to get out ahead of it by having some type of their own coin in place if they see that this is the direction that U.S. currency is going in.
All right, it's actually kind of I'm leaping to a conclusion here, but maybe it is CBDCs are going to be the Trojan horse that gets everyone into Bitcoin. Maybe as they try to kill it, they end up creating the thing that destroys themselves. I don't know. Is this a Star Wars plot? I'm not sure. But I think that's all we have time for. And I really thought Scott was going to take it, maybe Matty, but then Mine Your Biz started talking about my favorite subject, and that's brass and lead and, what we do. If it does hit $1 million in 90 days, we need to soak in as much Mine Your Biz content as possible. Mine Your Biz, feel free, leave us with some parting thoughts, and will Bitcoin hit $1 million?
Well, first off, I just need to express my gratitude again for being on such an excellent panel of accomplished thinkers. Really, mad respect to the other people who I got to share this stage with. I can't wait till we meet up in person at a live event and get to laugh about, hopefully, all of this being in the rear view a few years down the line. But no, Bitcoin's not going to $1 million in the next 90 days. Please check out sub.myb.lol, where you can check out my content. And thank you for having me again.
Yeah, Bitcoin will not hit $1 million in 90 days. And the good thing is, if it does, there is no society for you to come at me. So that's all we got time for today. Until next time, make sure you hit the like button and make sure you follow every influencer, the content creators here. They're putting out fantastic content across all types of the crypto space here. So check the links. Scott, you got the big thing. Who's that space tomorrow, you said? You got Balaji
Michael Saylor. Yeah, Balaji, Michael Saylor for now. I believe Jimmy Song's going to be there. It should be pretty epic. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Right. Basically, you just ask one question, let Saylor talk for an hour. It's the easiest hosting you got.
Bitcoin is granted on Manhattan. That's all we got.